I think Donald Trump is Donald Trump. But I do want to say something about this, about Donald Trump, because I think it's really noting that Donald Trump calling John McCain anything other than a hero is just Donald Trump being a blowhard.
Look, Joe, he found it. Yeah, that was Elizabeth Warren.
He found it.
Yeah, he found it. I don't know where it was, but he found it. That's good. Now he knows about it, too. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. You want to weigh in on Donald Trump?
Well, John McCain is a hero, and what he said is, I think, wrong. I like Mr. McCain. We've got to work together on a few things. My background is actually the sport of wrestling. It's always interesting when the senator walks up to me and he's got a background in the same sport, so that's one of the first things we always talk about. So John McCain's a good man, and it's unfortunate what Donald Trump had to say about him.
All right, let's move on to a couple of different issues that you guys will be confronting in Washington, the Iran deal. What's your position on that? Where do you think the stumbling blocks are, and ultimately, do you think it needs to move forward?
I don't. I think there are real problems with this agreement. First of all, remember the premise. For months and months, we were told we want to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear nation. Now that's no longer the goal. In fact, this spells out how they're going to get there over a certain amount of time. But when you look at the agreement, you got the fact that $150 billion is freed up for Iran to use for all kinds of bad things. You got the arms embargo is lifted. You have Israel and the Arab nations all agreeing that this is a bad deal. I think it's a bad deal and should be turned down. But the burden is tough right now. When we did the Corker legislation, the burden was actually shifted. Now we need a supermajority to actually disapprove this thing. And with what happened at the United Nations, I think it's going to be tough. But I think we need to make the case, take the case to the American people, have the debate in Congress, and hopefully we can turn this thing down.
Joe has a question for you. Joe?
Well, but Congressman, unfortunately, the president may pass one of the most significant pieces, most significant foreign deal in decades by actually vetoing the will of the House and the Senate. What can you do if he vetoes a piece of legislation, especially when you still have the Ayatollah talking about death to Israel?
Yeah, you have to make the case, and we have to try to override it. Again, that is a tough burden. I think it's going to be difficult, but I hope we can, because I think, when the Prime Minister of Israel says what a bad deal this is, when the folks in Saudi Arabia say what a bad deal this is, that should tell us something. So we need to make the case, talk about how this is not in the best interest of the world, not in the best interest of Israel, and frankly, not in the best interest, in my judgment, for the safety of the world. And we'll make that case. There's going to be a big debate over the next 60 days.
But then if you happen to be successful and get it overridden, then where are we? Because we're back to square one.
Right.
Yes.
Is there really any realistic possibility of convincing the other members of the P5+1 to reimpose sanctions? If we don't reimpose sanctions, then where are we?
If the United States leads. I mean, one of the reasons I think you saw these other nations saying, well, we kind of want to move away from the sanctions, because they didn't see the strong leadership from the United States saying, no, let's double down on those sanctions. They were working. After all, that's why Iran initially wanted to negotiate with us. So we go back to the sanctions. We show the United States is committed to those based on what the United States Congress just said. Then you have a chance to bring those people back in line and put the sanctions back on Iran and get to a much better agreement, which I think should be the goal for, again, the safety of our country, the safety of our best ally, Israel, and frankly, the safety of the world.
And Steve, I'll put this to you. Here's what the Wall Street Journal's editorial says. Obama's UN first gambit. The Security Council vote means that the process of lifting international economic sanctions is now underway, and the pact will roll forward. Mr. Kerry and supporters of the deal will also now argue that if Congress does reject the pact, the international coalition and sanctions regime can't be reassembled. This has been Mr. Obama's strategy all along, to present Congress with a political fait accompli. Even if Mr. Obama does veto a resolution of disapproval, a bipartisan majority vote against the Iran deal would be a forceful statement to Iran and the world that Mr. Obama is acting without the support of the American people. I'm not sure where the American people stand. I think they're a little war weary, sir, with all due respect. And I'm not sure they see a lot of other options here.
They may be, but we have to have the debate in Congress. I mean, the good thing is there's 60 days, there's going to be that debate, and we're going to spell it out. And if, in fact, we can get that supermajority that's going to be required to override the president's veto when we disapprove it, which I think will happen, if we can get that supermajority, then we can make the case and send that message. The American people, through their Congress, has spoken and said, no, Mr. Mr. President, this is not the deal we want. We want something better that is in, I think, the interest of security for our country and Israel, and as I said, the entire world.
All right, Jim Jordan, Congressman Jim Jordan, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. Coming up, it was a historic